back to the Christ and Culture. This is Gordon.
And this is Clint. And this week we have a special guest, Chris Donato.
What's up?
Chris, you want to tell us a little about who you are? And actually, you have a YouTube channel, too. You want to tell us about that, too?
I do. Yeah, so I was thinking what to say first. So my name is Chris Donato. I'm a missionary with Door Ministries, my third year being in the mission. I've been married for 11 years to Erica. I have 2 girls, 5 and 7.
Yeah. Nice.
Keep that secret for anybody who wants to steal them and hold them for ransom. Don't need to know their names because I've got money.
A record holder as a power lifter.
Oh Lord! In Colorado, it doesn't count. Oh no, I do have one here in Texas. Yeah, that's really? Right. Yeah. I mean, in this one federation. Yeah.
Are there a lot of federations for powerlifting in
tons
Texas?
Of them. Yeah, there's tons of them. Yeah.
What's the record?
Mine was deadlift was 512, and my bench was 303, I think. And it was for my weight class. But I mean, if you go to like the big federations where people are like super strong, I'm like nowhere near that. For my weight class, I should be like deadlifting like over 600 pounds, but I'm not there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
But I also have like a life and family, and that's not my priority.
So
apparently everybody
it's
else,
just for fun.
Apparently everybody else in Houston does too. Since the federation you joined, you're the winner.
That's crazy though. Yeah. Holy cow! You want to tell us about your channel and what that looks like?
Yeah. So I only have 3 episodes up just because I'm not a techie and ran into a problem, and so I haven't figured it out yet. Well, I figured it out. I just haven't done it yet. So I haven't uploaded in like 3 weeks. But the channel's called Drinks with Dreads, and it's basically me sitting down, having a beer, any sort of drink with someone. It's kind of based around that kind of community, getting together and sharing, and just getting their story. Whoever the person is, I pick people based on not necessarily ministry, but like the life they've lived, what their interests are, what they do, and just go a little bit deeper than the surface of what do you do, but why and what inspired that. So I have one with a friend who left ministry to be do full-time music and open his own studio out of his house. I have one with a friend who has his own coffee roasting company and his love and passion for that, and like where he finds even spirituality within that.
Right.
I have another one, a friend of ours who is who's mixed race, black and Native American, and just asking him what his experience has been in doing youth ministry in a church that's majority Anglo, and just kind of growing up with that. So just kind of getting people's stories. It's something I love doing naturally, and it's been on my heart for the past 5 or so years, and I kept saying no. And I read Mother Angelica's her first bio, and in it she said, if God ever inspired her to do something, she would just do it, and if it crashed and burned, who cared, because God still loved her, and if it took off, awesome. And so I was like, okay, I have no excuse. So I got the basic stuff I needed, used my phone and a couple of lapel mics, and it's been so fun. I love it.
You do that all on a phone?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
the
good.
recording and the editing on the phone.
Dang.
And the editing?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, like an app?
Yeah, like the iMovie on the phone. It comes on the iPhone.
Dang, you might have to teach us how to do that after this. Well, that's really cool though. Yeah. I love it. Like, you're literally just sitting down and talking, like getting to know the person.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think that fits really, really well with what we're talking about today too, because we're going to be talking about the movie Tolkien, about J.R.R. Tolkien, and that was something that he and his friends, the Inklings, like that's what they did. They sat down, they got to talk to people. They went for these really long, obnoxious walks where they would walk and talk until like 2 o'clock in the morning, and their wives would get mad at them, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they just got to know people and their stories. So that's what we're going to be talking about, the movie Tolkien. And to get started, I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while.
It's been so rough. I needed to see it. You saw it. You're like, I can't say anything. Before we started recording, we were trying to talk. I'm like, stop talking.
Yeah, mics are off.
Save it for the show.
We literally had to cut ourselves off. So I finally want to know, what were your thoughts on this movie? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Honestly. I mean, I've read a bunch of Tolkien. I've read one bio. I read this. It's sort of a bio. And I thought they did a really good job. I wasn't sure because I saw in some of the advertising that they were kind of throwing in the mixing the war and his stories kind of visually, and so I was kind of worried about that. But I thought they did it really well to the point where it just came across really good. And it took some liberties with the story, especially with like him and his wife, but I understand why, like visually. Like you don't want all the communication to be through letters or things that happen just through letters in the movie.
Right.
Although that can work, it has worked in movies, but I loved it. I thought they did a really good job. I was surprised where they stopped. Because they didn't go into the Inklings. They started with the TS, whatever his like high school group was called, that journey with him. It started in high school, and then it went basically through the war, and then two of them passed away in the war. And so I was actually talking with someone else today. It would be awesome to have like a second one, and that went into more of the writing and the Inklings and brought in C.S. Lewis and other people.
Or we could even call it like the Inklings.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Write that down. Edit that,
We'll
take that out, and we'll write it down.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. Because that was actually one of the critiques I had, too. You haven't seen it yet, Gordon.
I've
right?
not seen it.
Okay. Why are you here?
I probably would not have many critiques.
Yeah.
I'm the Costello to the Abbott and Costello group right now. I'm just here to ask who's on first.
The control group.
Yeah.
So I actually had the opposite reaction. I was not a fan. When I first watched it, and the day I talked to you, I was pretty undecided. So part of it was just there were some really specific things that were awesome and just really accurate to who they were. My favorite one, I keep telling this to Gordon, is the sugar cubes.
Oh, yeah.
And how Edith actually used to throw sugar. It was more discreet than what they showed in the movie, but like just little details like that were just so on point. But then there was just like so much, I think, of who Tolkien was that was missing. I mean, a lot of that being, I think, the faith aspect. They almost portrayed him as being anti-priest or like not liking Father Francis, which was kind of weird to me because he's written multiple times that Father Francis was like
he was a father figure,
the most important person in his life.
Yeah,
and so that relationship kind of messed with me a little bit. But I also think like visually, it was a pretty cool movie. Like it was cool to see. I think the battle scenes were awesome.
Yeah,
having the like built into the flames, seeing like the Balrog and stuff like that. Like, it was so cool.
Yeah, having the wraith going and like when people got shot, it was like the wraith stabbing them.
Yeah. So I think like that kind of visual interpretation, like in the battlefield, was super cool. It was just like the person of Tolkien and how they portrayed like his personality. It just seemed like there was something off.
I read in. And I saw it in passing, so I didn't dwell on it because I hadn't seen the movie yet. But I read how someone was complaining about the lack of his faith life. But it didn't bother me because I didn't expect Hollywood to put that in there.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't expect them to spend time and show how much of his Catholic faith went into the story and stuff like that. So that didn't bother me much. And also, I think the times where they showed him most angry at the priest or upset about the priests, I mean, we're in like some pretty rough areas where it came to the point where, you know, the priest was his legal guardian. He was like a father figure, and he saw Tolkien not performing to what he needed to do because he wasn't rich and couldn't get into Oxford. He couldn't pay for Oxford, so he needed a scholarship, and he was spending time with her. Not necessarily a bad thing, but he also like failed an important exam, and so when he told them, "Hey, you can't communicate with her until you're 21, where I'm not responsible for you." I understood that made sense to me why he would be upset and angry at him.
I was kind of reading this. I think someone else that our account follows on Twitter was saying the same thing. Like his faith life seemed less there. But I guess what I would want from a Tolkien movie, and this is funny because I know nothing from Tolkien, would be what led him to write Lord of the Rings and so on. Did it seem like that, or just seem more of like a biography of Tolkien growing up? Did it seem like more of like what inspired him to be an Inkling, or did it seem just like this is like literally who Tolkien is and what he grew up and did? Does that make sense?
I think they hinted at that a little bit. I don't know if they ever like explicitly said like this is how it happened, but you see the Inklings were foreshadowed from that group that he had as a high schooler and into university.
What were they called?
It's driving me nuts too. TCBS, there we go. Tea Club and Barovian Society, there we go. Okay, TCBS. So Yeah, I think the TCVS obviously is like a foreshadowing of the Inklings, but they never really mentioned the Inklings, and they kind of... Well, actually, they didn't cut it off before then, because in that final couple of scenes...
Which I love.
I think those were the best scenes.
Now they ended it. It was, like, perfect.
Right. But they should have kept going. So, the Inklings would have been around at that time, though. Like, they would have been established by then. But there was no mention of them at that point.
They didn't pour it on heavy, like, here's what inspired him to do. But what I like about it is they sprinkled it throughout the storyline of his life. Like, his mother, like, read them, about Sigurd and these Norse or Finnish, whatever tales, which were his inspiration. He switched his major to philology, his love of language, and they kept alluding to him being, like, a linguistic genius, which is where he was able to, like the professor said, borrow from other languages like Finnish.
Right.
So they lightly sprinkle it throughout, and definitely with the visuals and although Lord of the Rings is not an allegory, it borrows from his life, and so like during the war, you see like in the fire, the Balrog, you see a dragon blowing fire while
the flamethrower
while they're using flamethrowers or like the wraiths and the night fighting. So they definitely sprinkle it. They don't it's not like blatant,
right?
But yeah,
that was my next question. Actually, I think like the listeners know Clint loves Tolkien, and I think it's safe to assume they might probably know you do too, since a lot of the media, a lot of the media, and a lot of media he intakes in the beginning when he talks about it are books that he's borrowed from you.
Yeah,
it's usually Tolkien based or C.S. Lewis based. But did the war inspire Lord of the Rings?
I think he says it in this book I brought. I think he explains it like really well, to where it's like it's not an allegory, but it's like anything else in our life, that like anything that's come before is going to influence us now.
Well, that's actually something I wanted to talk about too. So I think while you're looking that up, he hated allegory, but he loved symbolism, and I think between him and C.S. Lewis, there's a big distinction of how they do that. So he never wanted to explicitly like create an allegory, but things that happen in our lives influence the way that we write and the way that we create art, and that just naturally becomes part of our writing. And so he even had in his letters a quote where he said that Lord of the Rings is explicitly a Christian or Catholic, I don't remember which word he used, piece of literature, and he said unconsciously so at first, but in the revision consciously. So
yeah, I think that's what I was looking at.
It's not an allegory to like the Christian story is what he's saying either.
Yeah. So it's not an allegory. And I mean the best example I can give of that is like the Christ figures in each story. So you look at C.S. Lewis and the Narnia story. There's an obvious Christ figure, Aslan. But if you look at,
he even alludes to it in the last book, saying, "I'm called something else in your world, Jesus."
Yeah, and so it's like an obvious comparison, obvious allegory in all these different ways, not just that one. But then you go to Lord of the Rings, and we even did an episode on this. There are Christ figures in Lord of the Rings, but none of them are this explicit interpretation of Christ figures, because Tolkien didn't think you could match that.
Like, and he didn't plan out and say, "I'm going to write these characters out as Christ figures." They just
exist.
Like, because of his faith in his life, it naturally came out, and that's just naturally how he wrote them.
And I think, to be honest, like that's how we're supposed to like be as Christians. Like everything that we should create should exude that. I mean, that's part of the show that we have here. It should just come forth in everything that we do.
Yeah. In this letter, Tolkien actually sent to this guy that was helping him put things together for Silmarillion. It was a guy who had read Lord of the Rings and basically pointed that out, all the Christ figures. Gandalf's this way, and the sacrifice, and there's the priest, prophet, king. And Tolkien's response to that was, much of this is true enough, except, of course, the general impression given that I had any such schema in my conscience and mind before or during the writing. So then he goes on and says, no doubt Tolkien would have agreed with C.S. Lewis's conclusion that the deeper meaning of a story must rise from the writer's lifetime spiritual roots rather than be consciously inserted.
Yeah.
Like it just naturally came out. He didn't plan on I'm going to have 3 Christ figures and they're going to be priest, prophet, king. Like it just naturally came out that way.
Right.
And I think that's what he how he explains the religion aspect and how Catholic it is in there. It's not overt. It's very within the world. You know, like
Right.
when they cry out to forget one of the Valar. That's you know, the communion of saints.
Right.
So that's what that is. You know, that's or they give prayer of thanksgiving. They give prayer of petition in there when they're asking for help. That's all throughout the story.
The elves as angels,
Mm-hmm.
lambus bread as the Eucharist, like all that stuff. And I think going off of that, a big part of it is he doesn't think that faith is something that you do as much as it's something of part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just naturally comes from that. And so I think the big question next then is, would Tolkien have liked this movie, knowing that he obviously valued and cherished his faith, but he was more subliminal in the way that he presented it?
Mm-hmm.
So what do y'all think?
I have no idea. I mean, based on what I just learned, I think he would fear that people might think his stories are more of an allegory based off of some of the imagery in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't really allude to the fact that it's not in the movie. They just show, like, this is his life, and then these are the stories he's written in sequence of certain events through his life. And I think that might come across as like, oh, this is what he was writing about, rather than like, this is what inspired that idea. And he might not like that, but otherwise I have no idea. I posed that question to Clint because I was just curious as a writer, someone who I think like writes adventure stories, the hero's tale and all that stuff. I'm sure that he knew and liked or hated, even though this was a biography or whatever. Would he have liked the way they told his story?
Yeah, when you asked me this question the other day, it kind of threw me off too, because I don't think that he would want explicit Catholicism in the movie, other than obviously like telling his story. There's going to be the priest there.
Yeah.
But I do think like that's obviously a really big part of his life, and so the idea, like what you were saying, of how it should show that's part of what inspired him, I think, at least in undertones, he would have appreciated.
I think he would have. I honestly think the only complaint he would have had would have been they didn't focus a ton. It was in there, so I appreciate it, but they didn't focus a ton on the mythologies that he borrowed from. Like, they didn't go into detail about that.
True.
It's in there. They didn't go into detail about that, and he borrowed from different languages and the different mythologies, and his whole purpose was to give, Great Britain a mythology, like a history, which in his opinion they lacked. But I think he would have enjoyed it because it focused on, other than his faith, it focused on two huge parts of his life, which was brotherhood, was fraternity. That was huge.
Right.
That's why he always had it. Like in high school, they created that group, and then as he got older, they created the Inklings. That was huge for him. And then his love for his wife. I mean, like, I always forget how much their story is such. It's straight out of a movie. Like they fell in love. Then they were told they couldn't see each other until a certain age, and then during the time she gets engaged, he's broken, and then she literally calls it off because in a letter he like pours out his love for her.
Yeah.
And they get married. I'm like, come on. I thought they did such a great job with those things because he led such an ordinary, normal life.
Right.
Of course, World War I, he didn't lose both of his parents early in age, but after that, he ran like a normal, regular, everyday life, which is why he considered himself a hobbit. So I thought it was
In all but size.
well done with how normal his life really was.
Yeah.
I think most of the turmoil was in the beginning, which is what they covered. I think he would have appreciated it because it covered those two big things: his relationship with his wife and fraternity, the friendships he had that formed him.
Yeah. I think that's would be an interesting thing to. Obviously, there's no way to find out, but I'm sure you'd have split reviews as most of us do.
Yeah, and you can't ask any of his family because they hate everything that anybody does.
Yeah, they didn't want to have anything to do with this at all.
Yeah,
but that's pretty typical. They did the same thing. Actually, the Lord of the Rings TV show that's coming out, they basically are completely hands off from that too.
Yeah.
So,
On a kind of separate note, you know what we do with this podcast because you've listened to a few episodes where we take something we're talking about and also apply it to maybe our faith or whatever. Since Tolkien loved fraternity so much, how important do you think that is? And this is more of an open on the table, covered and directed at you, that is actually when it comes to whether it's life or a faith life?
I think it's huge and good and something that's died out. Because I think what you see in his relationships, a lot of times because a lot of people who read Lord of the Rings, especially between Frodo and Sam, they go, oh, they're gay. Like, there's people who go straight to that,
Yeah.
they were gay.
They wouldn't have said that like so many years ago. Though.
Yeah, it's like back then, like it was normal for men to be emotionally attached, to be physical with each other, hugs. You know, you see in the movie after he gets drunk after being so sad that she was engaged, that
right.
he like his friend gives him some encouragement. He touches him on the hand. Like that wasn't anything questionable then. But now, if you're close to a guy, if you hug or you're emotional with a guy or touch his hand, then who you are is called into question. And what I love about what they show within the relationships is they weren't just trying to better each other in their crafts, because one was a composer, writer, poet, artist.
Yeah.
But they also called each other out and called each other to greatness and called each other out when they were screwing around. Like when his opportunity appeared he had lost the opportunity for his scholarship to continue, but then this professor was kind of subtly showing interest in him, and they were like, how do you not see this as your opportunity? Like, switch your major and then you can continue and possibly get this. They were just calling him out and saying like, hey dummy, like pay attention. And I think we don't have that. I think now we get together, it's for guys, we get together, we hang out, we drink beer, we stay super service level and just shoot the breeze, and like that's it. Very rarely will we really call each other out and hold each other accountable. I'm even thinking now, like last summer we had a really good consistent guys group that gathered, and we're trying to talk about starting that up again now because it kind of died during the year. And one of the guys mentioned, like, what is this? Are we going to hold each other accountable? Are we going to call each other out? Or are we just going to drink beer? Which is fine. That's good community. It's fine. It's good. But do we want more than that? Do we need to set that straight at the beginning that this is a safe place to do that?
Right.
I wonder if that's part of the reason why we today feel so overwhelmed with everything, is we feel like we're going about everything on our own rather than having this group of guys or group of girls to support us in that.
Well, I know you too have been talking about lately, like just the idea of like the Inklings.
Yeah.
And then like something that Father Mike said about creation. And so I don't know if that also plays into not only like holding each other accountable and just being like authentic, but you'll do more of what you want to do if someone else is there to like talk you through that, or be like, or like see you do that and then be like, that's a terrible way to go about that. But
yeah. And you mentioned Father Mike, and I was kind of catching up on his homilies, and so I was listening back to all the Lent ones, which is over. But I know at the beginning he mentioned because a lot of people say like don't share what you're doing for Lent because it's not humble or whatever. But he was like, no, he's like, find some people to tell them and they can hold you accountable. He said, don't do Lent alone, And I learned that in ministry. I learned the power of having people around you when I moved back to Texas and to the church I was working at, and they had deanery meetings. And in this deanery, like none of the youth ministers ever came. And I was like, what's the deal? But then as I started meeting other youth ministers around like the Houston area and just starting sharing like triumphs and struggles, and everyone's like, oh, I thought I was the only one that went through this, or I thought I was the only one that went through this. And I just saw the importance of community and sharing, because there's there's nothing new under the sun. Like we're all going to go through something alike,
right? Or
have some 2 cents to give and support.
Well, it's that idea that Satan separates us, right? Tries to make us feel alone.
Scatters.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this a lot, Gordon.
Yeah.
Like this is one of my biggest things in faith is like brotherhood. In college, I created this men's group. Actually, a lot of them are listeners too, because I went to Seek conference from Focus, and I'm familiar with that. And one thing they challenge us to do is exactly what we're talking about here: to surround yourself with people who are going to build you up and to push you to go forward. And so, coming down here, like I didn't feel like I had that as much, and so I've been reaching out with Gordon. Obviously, we're accountability partners now, and just checking with each other on all kinds of different stuff. And then what you were just talking about with the creation thing. So obviously the Inklings, they would create something, and then every week they'd come together and share. And so what he was talking about with Father Mike is, I think this was back in probably November, he had an episode where he talked about how to create something requires vulnerability, but to critique something does not, right? And so to critique something, you're just saying what you think of someone else's vulnerability, which is mostly true, I think. And so I think what I kind of posed to Gordon is like, if we, within our accountability group here, create something and share it, that's forcing us to open ourselves up in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise.
It also reminds me, I like doing art,
Yeah,
but on my own, I hardly do it.
exactly. Yeah.
And Chris knows I like doing art, and actually I've never told him this, but like it's been like a blessing being able to work, because for my listeners, Chris is sort of my boss.
Sort of.
On a lateral level.
He doesn't do anything I say. Just kidding.
But it's been like a blessing working with Chris because he tries to give me artistic things to do. So like backdrops for series we do, as well as he knows that I like building like structural pieces, and we haven't like put this in place, but we've talked about like maybe I can do something like that for a retreat. He knows I don't really buy like art pieces. I just go dumpster diving. He's like, let's just take a weekend. Let's go dumpster diving.
Yeah,
he's like,
good.
told me all this stuff. And like, if it wasn't for Chris, though, there's a lot of things I wouldn't do artistically that on my own. And so I think there's another power to that too. Someone else just like, let's go do this because and provide those opportunities.
One thing that I wanted to go back to is we were talking about Tolkien's idea of like fantasy and myth before, and I think one big thing that he has, or that he believes about myth, is that it's supposed to pull you into a world that almost seems more real than the world that you're actually in. And he talks a lot about that on fairy tales in one of his lesser known books. And so I was wondering what you guys think about that these fantasy worlds that he believes we should create are supposed to draw us into a deeper reality than the reality that we exist in, and then point us to something outside of that. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't think I heard the quote fully, but the only thing that comes to mind when you say that about like this like fantasy in a general sense is supposed to draw us into something like a deeper meaning of something is I think of D&D, and I think of everyone I've ever talked to and their first character they've ever built. And usually when someone builds their first fantasy character, it's like this, I don't know if it's an ideal version or just it's mostly themselves.
Oh yeah,
like everyone makes a character that's like, this is who I would be in this world.
Yeah.
And it's not until you play like 3 characters, maybe even sometimes maybe 1, where you're like, how much fun would it be to play a character I would never be? But usually people build like, and then I think when they play that character and something happens and like they have to learn to adapt, like because it's them, they're finding these things about them along the way that maybe they've never experienced because they don't go through such trauma in real life that they have in this like fantasy world. And so it's like it's like an introspective weird type role playing. I don't know about where that guides you in the end of the quote, like guiding you to something more, something greater, but that's the first thing that came to mind.
It brings you to a deeper understanding of yourself at the very least, I think. I can't tell if you're thinking still.
I'm really
That's
thinking.
his thinking.
Okay.
Gordon knows what I'm like.
He's not good about
thinking.
We'll have an answer next week.
All right. That's fine.
Say the question again.
So basically, his understanding of myth is that it's something that when you're drawn into it, it seems more real than the reality that we are presently in. So the real reality. And from that, it typically points you to something greater, like that's real, but that we don't realize is real in our current world. So, for example, he goes on in that same book to say that Christ is the ultimate myth, not because it's false, but because he draws us into himself in a way that we start to understand things that are more real than reality itself. So, I think of like Ignatian contemplation. I don't know if you've done that, but like the whole point of it is it real in the sense that I'm touching this table and it's real? No, but I'm placing myself into this story of scripture where I start to understand realities that I wouldn't normally comprehend if I was just to look around at the things that I physically see.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit.
I'd say I agree. Especially, combine that with, how he had a hand in C.S. Lewis's conversion was through myths. He's basically saying, like, all these myths, Egyptian, Norse, whatever, were all pointing towards Christ. And that was C.S. Lewis's foot into the church. And the reality that those things came from somewhere. Like, they were inspired by something.
Right.
And I think that's why things like Lord of the Rings, or I guess it's not necessarily myth, but fantasy, like especially Harry Potter, they may have a larger audience than, say, like the comic book world, because the comic book world is not a bad thing, but it's escapism. Like I'm gonna read this to enjoy this and like jump in. It's great. Although they can go very deep and have very robust meaning and things to teach. But I think within like Lord of the Rings or different myths like that, I don't know, you kind of, it's something you can get into.
Yeah.
And it's can very much mirror your world, because I don't know if it's getting too weird, but like even the world we live in, we can all say different truths. Like, no, the reality is this. No, the reality is this. What's going on because of what we've been through, what we've seen, how our personal world has been shaped by our family, friends, things we've gone through. But we can't really do that with Lord of the Rings. There can be different interpretations of things, but like what he wrote is what he wrote.
Right.
And this is a good person. This is a bad person. This war happened in this way for these motives, and I can't say anything else. And so that's the reality. No matter what I've been through in my life, this is what happened in this story. And so I think that might be a part of it also.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that made sense.
No, it does.
I
wonder if part of it also is like within a myth, you have certain things that you're going to exaggerate to get a point across. And so I wonder if part of that also is when we're drawn into this whole world that you're talking about that goes deeper than the comics or other types of stories. When you're thrust into this whole world, everything around you becomes something that can exaggerate or teach you something new. And so I wonder if that's part of it too, where I'm trying to think of an example. This is an easy thing. Evil in myths is always exaggerated. Like, there's no doubt evil is evil and good is good. Like, in almost every myth. And so because of that, I think it helps us to understand the conflict between good and evil, right? So that's kind of a simple comparison, but I think myths do a really good job of portraying things in a more exaggerated way.
Yeah, and like the purpose of myth is to, I learned this in like scripture classes, but like is to teach about the world. Like,
yeah,
exactly. like the creation story, the creation myth isn't necessarily to say and teach that creation happened in 7 days, but God created all these things. It's all ordered. It all had a purpose. He had a vision, and has to teach. And I think that's why storytelling is so important and so good. How many people come to life and come to faith through like Narnia? You probably witnessed like reading. When I read parts from when Aslan's speaking, I like break down because like it's so powerful to me. I may not necessarily break down reading like the gospel, from the Bible, but that's what's happening and that's what's being said and that's what's happening through this line that's supposed to express who Jesus Christ was, and that tears me apart. And I've learned and I've learned so much from that, and it's expanded my faith life through this fantastical story.
Yeah,
almost enhanced my real life
right
from this fantasy.
Well, it takes the gospel, and it's something that gospel is almost something that we've become numb to in a lot of ways, because a lot of us have been raised with it, and the culture's been numb to it as well, and gives us that story in a different way that even for young kids is exciting. That's thrilling, but still teaching us the same story. I think that's part of it.
So here's what I think after like thinking on this for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I think what he said is true because when we live out our regular day, like real world life, like
Mm-hmm.
you just stated, sometimes we can just kind of be numb to certain things. We can get into routine. We can stop kind of like thinking philosophically about certain things or like searching or whatever. And when we start to like read fantasy or watch fantasy or any type of, I wouldn't even just go as far as fantasy, but like fictional story. I would say even like Netflix, like a movie or anything, and we get sucked into that and like we're a part of this story now. It allows our subconscious to like open up and take over. And when something happens or doesn't happen, or when certain things are unveiled, that natural desire to seek truth and for this or for that kind of comes to surface. So when something happens, you're like, that's not supposed to happen. He or she is supposed to die. And you can kind of begin to question why you were attached to that character, why this happened, and more truths to your own self and like your own journey like come to light. And I think that'll point you to some direction overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like comic book purists, people who follow the lore of comics, you know, they say that comic books are our modern day myth, like they're our modern day myths. And I mean, just think about it, the whole like MCU,
Right.
I mean, like how invested people were
I was
in this, you know, and then you get to Endgame and you have those you know final battles, like, you know, Doctor Strange brings them all to the battlefield and people are hooping and hollering and like cheering, and then you have the end. I'm ruining it. I just
We've
realized
talked
what I'm
about it.
doing.
We've already done it,
Okay,
so you're
good.
We'll put in a thing too.
But like, you know, and then it ends and people are broken. I mean, like I lost it in those final, but there's so much goodness in it, and you know who's bad and who's not, and you know, while watching that, whether you're reading or watching. The whole goal is to take time out of your life to invest in this, and while you're reading, while you're watching, you're contemplating, you're thinking, and then hopefully, I think it's to look back on your life, because sometimes we don't stop to reflect, and that can aid us, you know, in that reality, that real true life that's happening on the screen, that real true life that's happening in the book. We'll be able to reflect back on our own life. Kind of like Never-Ending Story. That's another story.
It never ends.
I do have one quote that's kind of long that I wanted to share on this topic. So this is again from On Fairy Tales. So Tolkien writes, "I propose, therefore, to arrogate to myself the powers of Humpty Dumpty and to use fantasy for this purpose, in a sense, that is, which combines with its older and higher use as an equivalent of imagination." So there's a lot of big words, so I'm going to kind of chop it up here a little bit. The derived notions of unreality, of freedom from the domination of observed fact. And so he's basically saying, like, there's this unreality, this fantasy, if you will, that isn't necessarily restricted by fact, and so there's something beyond that we can go to. In short of the fantastic. I am thus not only aware, but glad of the etymological and semantic connections of fantasy with fantastic. And so he's kind of drawing these comparisons with images of things that are not only not actually present, but which are indeed not to be found in our primary world at all, or are generally believed not to be found there. And so he's showing that in this unreality, or this fantasy world, we can see these realities that we were talking about that can't be perceived in our natural world, because it's not restricted by what is quote-unquote fact. But while admitting that, I do not assent to the depreciative tone that the images are of things not in the primary world, if that indeed is even possible. It is a virtue, not a vice. Fantasy, in this sense, is, I think, not a lower, but a higher form of art, indeed the most nearly pure form, and so the most potent. And so he's saying that because it's not restricted by what is factual, it's able to teach us things in a way that is more powerful and more artistic than anything else. So that's kind of taking what we've just been talking about and like doubling it up. He's saying it's not just effective, but the most effective.
And here's why. Humpty Dumpty.
Sat on a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
before he fell, though, Humpty Dumpty as himself was the world and humanity before the fall. And then he falls, right? Mm-hmm. And what God intended for us is broken. And, the end of the story, they couldn't put Humpty back together. Like, they couldn't fit all the pieces right. And it's because some of the pieces are of this world and some of the pieces are not of this world. And so we have to tell fantasy stories in order to understand the pieces we don't understand. Mm-hmm. And so that's what he's saying here is, like, we can't put this puzzle together. That's why he starts with the Humpty Dumpty thing. Because because of the fall, because of our brokenness, because of Adam and Eve, we can't comprehend the things that God intended for us that we can't comprehend here on earth now. But fantasy lets us comprehend those things because it adds in wizards and things that aren't real but explain this bigger picture of what, like, God and these things we can't understand to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, did you just do the thing, or is Humpty Dumpty actually about the fall?
No. I just did the thing based on what he said. I was trying to, I was really listening to what his quote was, and I think that's what he meant.
Damn.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, it makes me think back to, like, myth and the purpose of myth of, like, people didn't know, like,
maybe that is what Humpty's about, but
maybe it
is
now.
I believe it.
That's it. But, like, the idea of like, well, the reason people wrote myth is because they had questions about the world they lived in.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, maybe
right.
it's this.
Yeah.
Like,
why the sun rose and fell, and why we didn't see the sun every day. Mm-hmm. So there's like a goddess or god that would put it up, and they were usually like in prison to do so after doing that. How we got fire. Yeah, it's a great one.
And the idea of, and I think he says it like we take part in creation, in the creation of these worlds that authors create. Like, and I love when he talks about how he didn't necessarily create his world, but that he discovered it.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah, like it was he was a historian, and he's trying to figure out, like, the first thing he wrote, like, in a hole in the ground lived a hobbit. Okay, what's a hobbit? I gotta figure that out.
Right.
Where does it live? I don't know. Like, who and how was that world he lived in created? Mm-hmm. And he saw himself more as a historian, as a someone discovering something than actually just sitting there and imagining and creating. I kind of had that experience like 2 years ago when I went on my first men's retreat. I was doing the outdoor Stations of the Cross, and I'm very visual and I have a big imagination, so I can make up like random things on the fly. But like, I had this vision of this scene, and I spent once our day was over, I spent like the rest of the night just like writing and being like, okay, well, who in the story I came up with, I was like, okay, who is this person? Like, I kind of had that experience of like, I'm not just making this up, but I'm trying to discover who these people are in this world that popped up in my imagination. But there's truth and reality, and there are laws and rules in that. That's what it made me think of.
Yeah, and I've been experiencing that too. Like I said, I just started writing again for this little creation thing that we've been talking about. And as I write, I go in with basically nothing, and then you come up with a name or a character, and pretty soon you're just writing, and everything else just comes to you.
Well, yeah, I think J.K. Rowling, it all started with the Dursleys.
Oh, really?
I think that it started with them.
Wow.
I think they might have been like her first drawings or whatever, but I know they were very close to the beginning of the storytelling. I could be wrong. Erica can correct me, but like, it started with a name or a people or a family.
Yeah.
And then you just discover who that is.
That makes sense.
You know?
I can see it being the Ron's family.
The Weasleys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That could be like
They're pretty central.
Yeah, I don't know. But
so the last kind of thing I was thinking on is actually a word that Tolkien coined himself, the eucatastrophe. Mm-hmm. So the eucatastrophe is, well, it comes from, so it's finding the good which comes from the bad. Mm-hmm. And that was something that he loved and that he incorporated into all of his stories. So I just wonder what your guys' thought is on that. Maybe within some of his writings, or even just like, what does the eucatastrophe look like, do you think?
I mean, he ultimately says that it's, Christ's passion. Like those are like the ultimate eucatastrophe.
Yeah.
There's he's in there in the book I just brought. Like he says, there's joy in the beginning, and there's joy in the end, and like tremendous loss and death somewhere in the middle. But the good and the bad. I think it's throughout all of his stuff. I mean, like there's so much drama and loss and ache and sacrifice, but always for like the good.
I think that's why there's so much hope.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and it's the same for the Christian life, right? We know that there's hope because we know that there's a God who makes good come from the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have the worst possible thing that could happen to us on earth is the death of God himself.
Mm-hmm.
And the greatest possible thing that could happen to us comes from that, which is our redemption and ability to be with him from that.
Yeah, I think it's from what you just said reminds me of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he was in Auschwitz, but he very much paid attention to what was going on, and the people who had something to live for were the ones who were more well off. So he would tell a story about like someone might have had a wife in one prison camp and a daughter in another prison camp, and someone comes in from those camps and says, "Oh, your wife and your daughter, they're fine," and then someone else comes in and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, they passed away," and then like 2 weeks later their body gives away, they get sick and it breaks down and they pass away. Or someone came in and there was like the hope that, hey, after Christmas the Allies are going to come in and we're going to be saved. That time came and went, and people that hung all their hope on that got sick and passed away or gave up. And it also made me think of this article I just read. It just made me think of just our faith of like, what do we live for? And like that's what gives us hope. And it was this article about someone did this study about the places in the world where people live the longest. And one of the places was, I think, Okinawa. And they have this, I don't remember the term for it, the word, but there was a word in their culture that meant like what you live for, what gets you out of bed every day. And so it was natural for them to be like, well, I live to see my grandkids, like they give me life, or I fish to provide food for my village or whatever, but like not necessarily, they weren't living for success or wealth or anything, but like what gave them life. And I think that's where hope comes in, like what gives us hope. And I think that's, like you said, throughout his writing, throughout his fantasy.
Yeah.
Do you think eucatastrophe is lost in our modern culture?
Totally. Because no one wants to suffer. No one wants to suffer, but like we hide and do everything we can to stay away from it. And
avoid catastrophe, but in the same sense, would you also agree that people like seek out catastrophe in other things?
I think it happens, but they don't realize.
Like catastrophe is a bad way to put it, but in the bad of like, oh, that presidential speech was bad, or oh, this movie was so terrible. Like there it has to be extremely, extremely exceptional, or else it's just bad. And there's no in between, and there's no good in the bad. I
think that is the cause or an effect of the fact that we no longer recognize the eucatastrophe, because the eucatastrophe is still happening. Like there's still these joyful things happening. I think what's missing is that we don't take the time to look at it. And when we don't recognize it, what Gordon's describing happens. Because when we're not recognizing that there is good, it becomes that much worse.
With the eucatastrophe, like let's say like small eucatastrophes, the general public stays very surface. So people who are into fitness, that's suffering. Like you put your body through pain and suffering for a goal. Like there's a guy I used to follow on YouTube, Elliot Holston. He used to do strongman. He's huge, massive, and now he went down this weird new agey type route. But it's super interesting listening to him now because he talks about, and I'm always like we've had that in the church from the beginning, but like the idea of fasting. So like fasting's a huge thing. Like it's super popular right now, but mainly just for I can lose a lot of weight for fasting. But what are the lessons you learn within that fasting, within that struggle, like who you are and what you can do, not just the physical aspects, but spiritual aspects of if I can get through this, like not eating for however long, then other things wouldn't be so hard. And he even talks about, I think he used to be Christian, but he's, I don't know what he would consider himself now, but he's like very, you need to stop masturbating, you need to like not have sex till you're married, you need to not stop watching pornography. And so all of this is like self-sacrifice, fasting, and most people watching that, I think, or thinking about that, will remain very surface. Okay, well, then I can finally have sex when I'm married, versus no, because it's good and healthy and holy.
It creates temperance.
Yeah. But most of the time, whenever we suffer, like if you're in school, there's suffering and you're studying and time you have to spend doing that, going to classes. There's suffering in fitness and in health. There's suffering in all these other things. But then you see it where people don't want to suffer is in faith. Like, why is this so hard?
Right.
Why is believing in God so hard? Why is there suffering in the world? We don't see where do we find the good, where do we find the hope? We don't want it to be there.
Yeah.
But we'll choose it in all these other aspects of our life. And not necessarily notice that.
I agree.
Greatest Showman was really boring. That's what I'm saying.
That I disagree on. We can talk about that after. I do want to go ahead and wrap up with a challenge really quick. So I was thinking about this last night, and actually to prepare for today, I read Leaf by Niggle last night, which is...
Where? Do you like own it? Or
I Googled it last night, and I wasn't even trying to, but there's a PDF that was just top. So I was like... So Leaf by Niggle is actually a short story by Tolkien.
About?
Well, it's
Tolkien.
Yeah. So it's about this artist named Niggle, and there's actually a quote in the really beginning that I think portrays what we were talking about, the myth, a little bit ago. So it says, he was the sort of painter who could paint leaves better than trees. And I think that is basically the best way to summarize Tolkien's idea of myth. And so my challenge for you guys is to read a little bit of Tolkien this week, and not just like The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, but he has other less known works, and a lot of them are pretty short. Like I read Leaf by Niggle last night on this online PDF in, 30, 40 minutes. It's pretty easy, and it's just beautiful literature that draws us into something. About halfway through, I started to really remember what it was about, and I just felt this shift in the way that I was reading it. So I'm going to challenge you guys to find something that he wrote, read it, and just take some time to appreciate it, and maybe create something yourself. Maybe take some time to write or to draw or something like that. So with that, shout outs. Do you have any shout outs first?
I don't think so.
You don't have any?
No.
Chris, do you have any shout outs?
Shout out to Ethan Berger, who's on his way. He's going to be our summer intern.
When does he get here?
In 5 days.
Okay, nice. So I do want to give a couple shout outs to new people, though. New listener is Shiki, and then there's a user, a lot of numbers, whose name you didn't give me your name.
And Joe.
And Joe.
Yeah.
So thanks to you guys.
We're going to shout out Emmanuel, too. I saw he listened to our last episode. He hasn't listened in a while.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a complaint? He hasn't listened in a while.
No.
But also, there's a lot of you guys who are just coming back, who haven't listened in a little bit of time, and you're just coming back. So welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining us. So with that, what have we been taking in? You said you had a list. You want to go first?
I'm rereading parts of this book called The God Asks Fundraising. I'm reading Contemplative Youth Ministry, a book called Hold Your Children Tight, or Close to You, something like that. It's all about it's
Close to You sounds better.
Yeah, it's actually rocking my thought about youth ministry, in that the reason parents have a hard time parenting their kids now is because of how big youth culture is, and so kids depend more on their peers for guidance and affection and all that versus their parents. And so it's all about how parents need to get that back. They need to be the center of their kids' life versus their parents now.
We talked about this, didn't we?
Did we?
A couple weeks ago, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about this. It's really rocking my world.
Okay. Well,
I have 2 kids, but then does youth ministry play into that? Hindering parents' attachment and the attachment of teens to their parents and parents to their teens.
Are we as youth ministers doing more harm than good?
Mm-hmm.
The world may never know.
Another podcast. I'll be back. We actually, this may be controversial, but we actually started watching Game of Thrones.
Okay. Started like
it.
season 1?
Yeah, we started from season 1 and we're on like season 4.
I just stopped.
Season 4 already?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first 4 seasons are...
I mean, I can't come...
The first 4 seasons are the most graphic.
Okay.
So...
Yeah.
You just got through the worst.
First season, and then it's...
No, so
you gotta get through all that.
No, it's the first 4 because didn't they change their contracts after the first 4 seasons? So there's no nudity clauses for all the main characters.
You could have said season 5 and like, well, the first 5 seasons.
Yeah. Well, Erica told me she's the researcher, but I think she said that at one point in the whole 8 years that there ended up when there were more male writers, there were more pornographic scenes.
Really?
When they brought on more female writers, they kind of they lessened.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah, but
that's
it makes
so
sense.
bad.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, music. I thought about this because I came prepared because I thought y'all did
That's
this.
good. No one ever says
yeah.
music.
David Ramirez, which is a Texas guy,
yeah.
which is funny. I just started listening to him a few months ago because I kept hearing his name throughout the years, and I looked him up and I was like, I know this guy because he went to. It used to be William Trace Baptist, but now it's Sugarland Baptist, and he is phenomenal. It's like hauntingly hopeful is how I talk about it. And then like, what's her name? Samantha Crane.
Hauntingly hopeful.
Yeah, and then
those are your words.
Yeah. Oh, on my way to this year's men's retreat, I listened to like all this stuff like the whole way.
Wow,
which is so good.
Not a bad title for the episode.
Yeah,
it's like we were just talking about hope.
Yeah, and then I have like Ike's new album, Ike Ndolo's new album on repeat,
and
then, like Audrey Assad's like last one like on repeat, just so good.
Nice.
Yeah, that's it. Music books. Yeah.
Music books.
Music books and.
That's what he said. Taking.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's like music books. This sounds awesome. Gordon, what do you got? Are you taking anything?
Nothing new. Still just crushing Downton Abbey with Lizzie.
So good.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw the last season.
And they're coming with a movie.
Oh yeah.
In August. Lizzie freaked out, so we're just trying to finish the last 3 seasons because we're almost done with season 3. There's only 6, so we're trying to finish the last 3 this summer. So come August, we can go and watch the movie and cry our eyes out together.
Yeah.
So I've actually been reading the book that you gave me, The Not a Tame Lion, by C.S. Lewis.
I love that.
It is so good so far. Big fan, much enjoyed.
It's kind of like a bio, and then it just gets into different elements.
Yeah, it's like a bio plus like this book that I have here, the Peter Kreeft philosophy of Tolkien, but it's like the philosophy of Lewis instead. So that one's really cool. Big fan of that. And then I've been watching the new season of Outlander, which is a pretty good show. And what else? Oh, I listen to a ton of podcasts, like
I've been doing it
too many. But I started a new one called Tea with Tolkien.
What? Oh,
yeah. So it's
it's a girl, right?
Yeah, it's
because she
Caitlin.
has. I know from Instagram. I didn't know she had a podcast.
Yeah, so she does like Etsy.
I know her from Twitter, but that's about it.
Yeah. So she also has a book too, but she just started a podcast back in end of November, early December. So short stuff. They're like 10 to 15 minute episodes. So really easy, good stuff. It's a lot of like what you and I talk about half the time. So it's good stuff. I think
she's the one. I think she wrote like a journal for each of the.
Yeah, that's her.
Each of the books.
Yeah. And also, well, she wrote is like her testimony through Tolkien, I think. If I remember.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's actually I added it to my list to check out.
I'm gonna add a question because I don't care and y'all can edit this. How have you read? You haven't read a bunch of Tolkien.
I've read like 3 chapters of Fellowship of the Ring.
Okay.
I think it's 3, maybe 4 chapters.
I'm not asking you this question then. How did you get into Tolkien?
You guys.
Like, do you remember when?
Do I remember when?
Yeah.
So I remember loving the movies when they first came out.
Was that your first experience?
I had not read them beforehand, but my family hates the movies. And so it wasn't until college when I started that fraternity, that guys group, when they all loved it. And so we binge watched the unedited extended versions like literally almost every weekend. And we would discuss like the philosophy behind it and all that stuff. And then I just dove in. I'm geeking out, sorry. But like I would read the one wiki to rule them all in my free time for fun and see how much I can memorize.
Yeah.
And then I'd go do Lord of the Rings trivia on QuizUp.
Uh-huh.
And like I dethroned 3 world champions on that.
That's awesome.
Come at me. That's how I got my nickname at the Pines. Strider.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
And mine's Gandalf.
Yeah. Gandalf and Strider. You can be Frodo and we'd have the whole trilogy.
Yeah, it's a funny thing since I haven't read Tolkien, and I only really because I just got the book like not last Christmas, the one before. It has all 3 of them. It's a really nice book because mostly being on the podcast with Clint, knowing you, I'm just like I never really knew the faith behind all that stuff, and like. But growing up, I thought I thought the movies were terrible and boring. I haven't even finished them. I fell asleep halfway through the last one. I own them all now. But I loved The Hobbit, like the movies.
No.
I thought they were so much fun and I enjoyed them. But I've never read The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And so they had my attention. I was also older when I watched The Hobbit, and I was younger when Lord of the Rings came out. So more of my attention and joy of movies were there. So I just had to say that. That's why I was smiling this whole time, because confession, I hated Lord of the Rings and I loved The Hobbit growing
I
up.
want to love The Hobbit. I don't love The Hobbit.
Movies. It's so hard. The book is great. They took too many liberties with the...
Yeah. I first came about it in middle school because like there was like a summer like reading list or whatever, like pick whatever you want to read, and it was like The Hobbit. I was like, I don't know what that is. So I went and found it in the library, and the cover was after Gwahir had like rescued all of them and brought them to the mountain, and so that was the cover of like this giant eagle and a wizard and all these small people. I was like, this looks awesome. And that was it. But that was it. Like I read that, loved it, and then like after I read that, somehow I was looking through all my dad's like old books, and he owned like this old collection of The Hobbit and then like all 3 Lord of the Rings in this like box set. Yeah. And I was like, oh, awesome. So then I read those. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And now my oldest is named after Samwise Gamgee's daughter and a flower in Lothlorien.
Yeah. So much for not saying their names.
That's true. I have no money, so if you steal them, you're not getting anything.
There you go.
Thanks so much for doing this.
It was fun. Next time when we talk about are we destroying families through youth ministry?
You want to go ahead and plug your show? And
yeah, so it's all Instagram, Facebook, and the actual YouTube channel. It's Drinks with Dreads. You'll find it.
You guys can find us as usual at On the Adventure 2 on Twitter, Facebook, The Christ in Culture. Find us on our SoundCloud, all that stuff. Check us out on our website if you want all the extra content, the videos, the blogs, all that fun stuff. It's thechristinculture.com. And also, if you like what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You can find us at The Christ in Culture there too, where for as little as $5 a month, you can get bonus content. So check it out.
As little as $1. Is it $5?
Well, it's $5 for the bonus content. You can give as much as you want, but if you want the bonus content, you got to get to the $5 tier.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you guys so much for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time.
Greatest Showman is great.
I agree.
False.
Yeah, we'll edit that part out.